Portland feels like a city caught between worlds, where gleaming food trucks serve artisanal donuts in the shadows of towering Douglas firs. But look beneath the quirky coffee shops and bicycle lanes, and you'll discover layers upon layers of fascinating history. Tonight we'll uncover how a muddy riverside settlement transformed into America's most unconventional metropolis, home to nearly 700,000 residents who embrace the motto, "Keep Portland Weird." Portland has weathered economic booms, devastating floods, political upheavals, and cultural revolutions to become one of the nation's most distinctive cities. We'll begin with a surprising discovery beneath Pioneer Courthouse Square, and from there, we'll trace the city's remarkable journey through timber barons, urban planning visionaries, and countercultural pioneers. So just relax and let your mind drift as we explore the captivating story of Portland. When you think of Portland today, perhaps you picture Powell's books stretching across entire city blocks, or food carts clustered around downtown corners, or cyclists pedaling through tree-lined neighborhoods. This city feels like it exists in its own universe, a place where creativity and environmental consciousness merge into something entirely unique. And indeed, Portland has become synonymous with alternative culture, sustainable living, and fierce independence. But the area now known as Portland has witnessed dramatic transformations that would astonish its modern inhabitants. In the 1980s, during construction work beneath Pioneer Courthouse Square, archaeologists made some remarkable discoveries. Native American artifacts, fragments of early settlement structures, and remnants of the original landscape emerged from the earth. These findings revealed that this bustling urban centre had been home to indigenous communities for thousands of years before European settlers ever arrived. It's fascinating to imagine that here, where Max trains glide silently through the heart of the city, ancient peoples once gathered, traded, and built their lives along the banks of the Willamette River. However, the true recorded history of Portland begins with the area's first inhabitants. Indigenous peoples, primarily the Multnomah, Clackamas, and other Chinook tribes, had been living in the region for millennia before any European explorers set foot in the Pacific Northwest. These communities thrived along the Columbia and Willamette rivers, developing sophisticated fishing techniques and trading networks that stretched across the region. The indigenous peoples who lived here understood something that would later attract thousands of settlers. This was an ideal location. The confluence of rivers provided abundant salmon runs, the fertile valley floors offered rich soil for cultivation, and the surrounding forests teemed with game. The area that would become Portland sat at the heart of a natural paradise. During the late 18th and early 19th centuries, the region remained largely isolated from European influence. While Spanish, British, and Russian explorers had begun mapping the Pacific coast, the interior valleys of Oregon remained virtually unknown to outsiders. The indigenous communities continued their traditional ways of life, unaware that dramatic changes were approaching from the east. The first significant European presence in the region came not from explorers or traders, but from a most unexpected source. In 1792, Captain Robert Gray, commanding the ship Columbia Rediviva, became the first recorded European to enter what would later be called the Columbia River. Gray's voyage opened the door to American claims on the Oregon Territory, setting in motion events that would transform the entire region. Following Gray's discovery, the Lewis and Clark expedition arrived in the area in 1805 during their historic journey to the Pacific. The expedition members spent time in the region, documenting the landscape, wildlife, and indigenous peoples they encountered. Their detailed journals would later inspire countless Americans to consider the Oregon Territory as a destination for settlement. But it would be several more decades before permanent European-American settlements began in earnest. The early 1800s saw a handful of fur traders and missionaries venturing into the region. but these were temporary residents who often returned east after completing their work. The real transformation began in the 1840s with the Great Migration along the Oregon Trail. Thousands of families loaded their possessions into covered wagons and embarked on the grueling 2,000-mile journey from Missouri to Oregon. These pioneers were drawn by promises of free land, fertile soil, and opportunities for a fresh start in the American West. Among these early settlers were two men whose rivalry would literally determine the name of the future city. Asa Lovejoy, a lawyer from Massachusetts, and Francis Pettygrove, a businessman from Maine, both recognized the potential of a particular site along the Willamette River. This location offered everything a growing settlement needed: access to river transportation, proximity to fertile farmland, and a natural clearing that would make construction easier. In 1843, Lovejoy and Pettygrove filed a joint land claim for 640 acres of wilderness along the west bank of the Willamette River. Their partnership seemed natural enough, but they couldn't agree on what to name their future city. Lovejoy wanted to honor his hometown by calling it Boston, while Pettygrove preferred Portland after his beloved Portland, Maine. Unable to reach a compromise through discussion, they decided to settle the matter in the most American way possible, with a coin flip, in what would become one of the most famous coin tosses in American history. Pettygrove called heads and won. The settlement would be named Portland, forever linking this Pacific Northwest city to a small seaport in Maine. This seemingly trivial decision would have lasting implications for the city's identity. Had Lovejoy won, we might today speak of Boston, Oregon, with all the confusion that would entail. Instead, Portland received a name that suggested maritime connections and New England sensibilities, themes that would echo through its development for decades to come. The early settlement of Portland faced enormous challenges. The site was covered in dense forest, requiring backbreaking labor to clear land for buildings and streets. The nearest supply sources were hundreds of miles away, making every tool, nail, and piece of hardware precious commodities. Winters brought flooding from the Willamette River, while summers often meant dealing with forest fires that could threaten the entire settlement. Despite these obstacles, Portland grew steadily through the 1840s and 1850s. The settlement's location proved even more advantageous than its founders had anticipated. Ships could navigate up the Willamette River from the Columbia, making Portland accessible to ocean-going vessels. This connection to maritime trade would prove crucial to the city's future prosperity. By 1850, Portland had grown to include several dozen buildings, a general store, a blacksmith shop, and even a small hotel for travelers. The population remained modest, probably fewer than 1,000 residents, but the foundations for future growth were solidly in place. The California gold rush of 1849 provided Portland's first major economic boom. While prospectors flooded into California seeking fortune, they needed supplies, food, and lumber for their mining operations. Oregon's vast forests and fertile farmlands positioned Portland perfectly to meet these demands. Lumber mills sprang up along the Willamette River, and the sound of saws cutting through massive Douglas fir logs became a constant presence in the growing city. Portland's merchants discovered they could make more reliable profits selling supplies to gold seekers than the miners themselves made searching for gold. Flour milled from Oregon wheat, lumber cut from Oregon forests, and salmon caught in Oregon rivers all found eager markets in California. This trade relationship established Portland as a regional commercial hub and brought the first substantial wealth into the community. The success of the California trade also attracted new residents to Portland. Entrepreneurs, craftsmen, and laborers arrived seeking opportunities in the booming economy. Many were immigrants from Europe, particularly Germany and Scandinavia, who brought skills in brewing, woodworking, and metalworking that would shape Portland's developing character. As the 1850s progressed, Portland began to take on the appearance of a real city rather than a frontier settlement. Wooden sidewalks replaced muddy paths, and brick buildings started appearing among the simple frame structures. The city's first newspaper, the Oregonian, began publication in 1850, providing residents with news from the outside world and helping to establish Portland's identity as an important regional centre. Transportation remained a critical challenge for Portland's continued growth. While the city enjoyed excellent river connections, overland travel was still difficult and dangerous. Roads were little more than rough trails, impassable during winter months and barely adequate during dry seasons. The need for better transportation would drive many of Portland's most important development decisions in the coming decades. The establishment of regular steamboat service on the Willamette and Columbia rivers marked another crucial milestone in Portland's development. These vessels could carry far more cargo than canoes or rafts, and they operated on predictable schedules that allowed businesses to plan their operations more effectively. The arrival of a steamboat became a major event in early Portland, bringing mail, supplies, and news from distant places. Portland's location at the confluence of the Willamette and Columbia rivers proved increasingly valuable as regional trade expanded. The city became a natural gathering point for goods flowing from the interior valleys toward ocean ports, and for manufactured items moving inland from coastal cities. This role as a transportation hub would remain central to Portland's economy for generations. By 1860, Portland's population had grown to approximately 2,800 residents, making it the largest city in Oregon Territory. The community had developed many of the institutions expected of a proper American city: churches representing various denominations, schools for children, and civic organizations that brought residents together for social and political activities. The approaching Civil War would test Portland's unity and resolve, but the city had already demonstrated remarkable resilience and adaptability. From a wilderness land claim settled by coin flip, Portland had evolved into the Pacific Northwest's most important commercial centre. The foundations for future greatness were solidly established, awaiting the transformative events that would shape the city's destiny in the turbulent decades ahead. The Civil War years brought unexpected challenges to Portland, despite Oregon's distance from the main theatres of conflict. While the state officially supported the Union cause, Portland's population included Confederate sympathizers who had migrated from southern states during the previous decade. Political tensions simmered beneath the surface of daily life, occasionally erupting into heated debates at town meetings and newspaper editorial battles. Oregon's contribution to the war effort came primarily through supplying food, lumber, and other materials rather than troops. Portland's mills worked overtime to meet military contracts, and the city's merchants discovered new markets for Oregon products in Union territories. This wartime economy accelerated Portland's growth and established trading relationships that would prove valuable long after the conflict ended. The completion of the Transcontinental Railroad in 1869 fundamentally altered Portland's position in the American economy. Suddenly, goods could travel between the Atlantic and Pacific coasts in a matter of days rather than months. While this development initially seemed to threaten Portland's role as a regional hub, city leaders quickly recognized new opportunities for growth and expansion. Portland's connection to the national rail network came through a complex system of river transportation and branch lines that linked the city to the main transcontinental route. The Northern Pacific Railway, completed to Portland in 1883, provided the direct connection that city boosters had long desired. The arrival of the first through train from the East Coast marked a celebration that lasted for days, with parades, speeches, and elaborate banquets honouring this milestone in Portland's development. The railroad brought more than just improved transportation to Portland. It ushered in an era of unprecedented population growth and economic diversification. The 1880s and 1890s saw Portland's population explode from fewer than 20,000 to over 90,000 residents. This rapid expansion transformed the city's physical appearance and social character in ways that would have astonished the early pioneers. Lumber remained Portland's primary industry, but the scale of operations grew dramatically during this period. Massive sawmills lined the Willamette River, their towering smokestacks visible from miles away. The Portland Lumber Company, established in 1882, became one of the largest timber operations on the West Coast. Ships from around the world docked at Portland's wharves to load Oregon lumber destined for markets in California, Hawaii, Australia, and even Europe. The timber industry created Portland's first generation of truly wealthy families. Men like Simon Benson, who built a lumber empire spanning multiple states, accumulated fortunes that rivaled those of Eastern industrialists. These lumber barons used their wealth to construct elaborate mansions in Portland's West Hills, many of which still stand today as monuments to this era of prosperity. But Portland's economy was diversifying beyond lumber. The city's strategic location and growing population attracted manufacturers of all kinds. Flour mills processed wheat from eastern Oregon and Washington, while breweries took advantage of the region's excellent water and nearby hop farms. The Weinhard Brewery, founded by German immigrant Henry Weinhard in 1864, became a Portland institution that would operate for more than a century. The influx of new residents during the railroad era dramatically changed Portland's ethnic composition. Irish immigrants, many fleeing poverty in their homeland, provided much of the manual labor for construction projects and dock work. Chinese immigrants, originally attracted to Oregon by gold mining opportunities, increasingly concentrated in Portland as mining declined. By 1890, Portland's Chinatown had become one of the largest on the West Coast, centered around 2nd and 3rd Streets. Italian immigrants brought skills in construction and food preparation that left lasting marks on Portland's architecture and cuisine. Scandinavian newcomers often found work in the lumber industry, drawing on traditional woodworking skills from their homelands. This growing diversity enriched Portland's culture, but also created tensions as different groups competed for jobs and housing. The rapid growth of the 1880s and 1890s strained Portland's infrastructure beyond its limits. Streets that had seemed adequate for a small town proved woefully insufficient for a major city. The lack of proper sewage systems created health hazards that threatened periodic disease outbreaks. Fire protection remained inadequate for a city built largely of wood, a vulnerability that became tragically apparent during several devastating blazes. City leaders recognized that Portland needed comprehensive planning to manage its growth effectively. The Portland Park Board, established in 1900, commissioned landscape architect John Charles Olmsted to design a park system for the rapidly expanding city. Olmsted's recommendations would shape Portland's development for generations, emphasizing the preservation of natural areas and the creation of connected green spaces throughout the urban area. The early 1900s marked Portland's emergence as a truly modern American city. Electric streetcar lines crisscrossed the metropolitan area, making it possible for residents to live in distant neighborhoods while working downtown. The first skyscrapers began rising along the Willamette riverfront, their steel frames and elevator systems representing the latest in architectural technology. Portland's business leaders dreamed of making their city the premier metropolis of the Pacific Northwest, rivaling San Francisco in importance and influence. The Lewis and Clark Centennial Exposition of 1905 provided an opportunity to showcase Portland's achievements to the nation. This World's Fair attracted more than 1.6 million visitors to Portland during its 5-month run, introducing countless Americans to the city's charms and possibilities. The exposition grounds, located in northwest Portland, featured elaborate pavilions displaying Oregon's natural resources, industrial capabilities, and cultural achievements. Foreign nations participated as well, with Japan's exhibit proving particularly popular among visitors. The fair's success boosted Portland's national profile and attracted new investment to the region. Following the exposition, Portland entered what many consider its golden age of growth and prosperity. The city's population continued climbing steadily, reaching nearly 250,000 by 1910. New neighborhoods sprouted in all directions as streetcar lines extended the practical limits of urban development. Areas like Irvington, Laurelhurst, and Westmoreland developed as fashionable residential districts for Portland's growing middle class. The progressive era brought significant reforms to Portland's government and social institutions. Mayor Harry Lane, elected in 1905, championed municipal ownership of utilities and public services. His administration established city-owned water and electrical systems that provided more reliable and affordable services than private companies had offered. These public utilities became models for other cities across the nation. Portland's cultural institutions flourished during this period of prosperity and growth. The Portland Art Association, founded in 1892, established the city's first professional art museum. The Orpheum Theatre and other venues brought national touring companies to Portland, offering residents access to the latest in theatrical and musical entertainment. The city's first symphony orchestra began regular performances in 1896, marking Portland's emergence as a serious cultural centre. Education became a priority for Portland's leaders as the city matured. The establishment of the University of Oregon Medical School in 1887 marked the beginning of Portland's development as a regional centre for higher education and medical care. Reed College, founded in 1908, quickly gained recognition for its innovative curriculum and high academic standards. These institutions attracted faculty and students from across the nation, further diversifying Portland's intellectual and cultural life. The city's growing sophistication was reflected in its architecture as well. The Portland Building, completed in 1895, showcased the latest in commercial design, while residential neighborhoods featured increasingly elaborate Victorian and colonial revival homes. Architects like A.E. Doyle began establishing Portland's distinctive architectural character, blending influences from various American regional styles with elements suited to the Pacific Northwest climate. Portland's relationship with the surrounding natural environment remained central to its identity even as urban development accelerated. The Columbia River Gorge provided not only scenic beauty, but also hydroelectric power potential that would prove crucial to the region's industrial development. Mount Hood, visible on clear days from downtown streets, served as a constant reminder of the wilderness that lay just beyond the city's borders. By 1910, Portland had established itself as the undisputed commercial and cultural capital of the Pacific Northwest. The city's port facilities handled increasing volumes of international trade, while its manufacturing sector supplied markets throughout the western United States. Railroad connections linked Portland to every major American city, and steamship lines provided regular service to Asia and other Pacific destinations. Yet beneath this prosperity, challenges were emerging that would test Portland's resilience in the decades ahead. Labour tensions were increasing as workers organised to demand better wages and working conditions. The timber industry faced growing competition from other regions, while technological changes threatened to disrupt traditional economic relationships. The approaching World War would bring both opportunities and upheavals that would reshape Portland's character once again. Would reshape Portland's character once again. Hey, the Great War reached Portland not through enemy armies or naval bombardments, but through an economic transformation that would fundamentally alter the city's character. When President Wilson declared war in April 1917, Portland's shipyards suddenly found themselves at the center of America's wartime production effort. The demand for vessels to transport troops and supplies across the Atlantic created opportunities that local entrepreneurs seized with remarkable speed and ambition. Within months of America's entry into the conflict, Portland's riverfront buzzed with unprecedented activity. Emergency shipyards sprang up along both sides of the Willamette River, their wooden frameworks rising like mechanical forests against the skyline. The sound of hammering, riveting, and welding echoed across the water from dawn until well after dark as thousands of workers labored to meet impossible deadlines. The most ambitious of these wartime ventures was the Columbia River Shipbuilding Corporation, established on Swan Island with backing from Eastern investors. This facility alone employed more than 25,000 workers at its peak, making it one of the largest industrial operations in the Pacific Northwest. Workers lived in hastily constructed housing camps that resembled frontier boomtowns more than established neighborhoods. Portland's population swelled dramatically as job seekers poured in from across the nation. The city that had counted 250,000 residents in 1910 suddenly found itself struggling to accommodate nearly 400,000 people by 1918. Housing shortages became critical as entire families crowded into single rooms or lived in temporary shelters near the shipyards. The strain on city services created problems that would persist long after the armistice. Among the newcomers were thousands of African Americans from the South, drawn by promises of well-paying industrial jobs that were largely unavailable to them in their home states. This marked the beginning of Portland's first significant African American community, concentrated primarily in areas near the shipyards and along the Willamette River. However, the welcome they received was often hostile, as established residents feared competition for jobs and housing. The wartime boom also attracted women to industrial work in unprecedented numbers. Portland's shipyards employed thousands of women as welders, riveters, and assembly workers, positions that had been exclusively male before the war. These women earned wages that provided economic independence many had never experienced, fundamentally challenging traditional gender roles in Portland society. The frenetic pace of wartime production took its toll on Portland's infrastructure and environment. The Willamette River became heavily polluted from industrial waste, while the city's streets deteriorated under the constant traffic of trucks hauling materials to and from the shipyards. Air quality suffered as coal-burning facilities operated around the clock to meet production demands. When the armistice was signed in November 1918, Portland faced the sudden collapse of its wartime economy. Shipbuilding contracts were cancelled overnight, leaving tens of thousands of workers unemployed. Many of the temporary residents who had flocked to Portland during the boom years departed just as quickly, seeking opportunities elsewhere. The city's population dropped by nearly 100,000 people within 2 years of the war's end. The post-war recession hit Portland particularly hard because the city had become so dependent on wartime industries. Unemployment soared as businesses that had expanded rapidly to meet wartime demand found themselves with excess capacity and no customers. Many of the hastily constructed shipyards were abandoned, their rusting hulks serving as monuments to the boom that had ended so abruptly. Yet Portland's leaders refused to accept economic decline as inevitable. The 1920s saw ambitious efforts to diversify the city's economic base and establish new industries that could provide stable, long-term employment. The Port of Portland, established in 1891, expanded its facilities to handle growing international trade, particularly with Asian markets, that offered promising opportunities for Oregon products. The timber industry underwent significant modernization during this period, adopting new technologies that increased efficiency while reducing the workforce needed for traditional logging operations. Large companies like Weyerhaeuser invested heavily in Portland area facilities, viewing the city as an ideal location for processing lumber destined for national markets. Portland's location advantages became even more apparent as the automobile age dawned. The city sat at the intersection of major north-south and east-west transportation corridors, making it a natural hub for the emerging trucking industry. Highway construction projects during the 1920s improved connections to Seattle, San Francisco, and inland markets, reinforcing Portland's role as a regional distribution center. The cultural changes of the 1920s found enthusiastic expression in Portland's entertainment districts. Jazz music flourished in clubs along Burnside Street and in the Pearl District, drawing both local residents and visitors from throughout the Northwest. The Prohibition era, while officially embracing temperance, actually saw a thriving underground economy of speakeasies and illegal distilleries that operated with varying degrees of official tolerance. Radio broadcasting began in Portland in 1922 with the establishment of KGW, owned by the Oregonian newspaper. This new medium connected Portland residents to national news, entertainment, and cultural trends in ways that had been impossible before. Local programming featured everything from classical music concerts to coverage of Portland's growing sports scene. The city's educational institutions continued expanding during the prosperous mid-1920s. Portland State University had its origins in this period, though it would not achieve full university status for several more decades. The public school system grew to accommodate the children of families who had settled permanently in Portland after the war, creating new neighborhoods centered around elementary and high schools. Residential development during the 1920s reflected both the prosperity of the era and Portland's unique geographical constraints. The West Hills attracted wealthy families seeking panoramic views and escape from industrial pollution, while working-class neighborhoods developed in the flatlands east of the Willamette River. Streetcar suburbs like Selwood and Woodstock offered middle-class families affordable homes, with convenient access to downtown employment. Portland's park system expanded significantly during this decade, building on the foundation laid by the Olmsted Plan earlier in the century. Forest Park, established in 1948 but planned during the 1920s, would eventually become one of the largest urban forests in the United States. These green spaces reflected Portland's growing consciousness of environmental quality and its desire to maintain connections to the natural landscape. The stock market crash of 1929 and the subsequent Great Depression struck Portland with devastating force. The city's economy, still recovering from post-war adjustments, proved particularly vulnerable to the nationwide economic collapse. Unemployment rates soared above 25% as businesses failed and construction projects were abandoned. Breadlines and soup kitchens became common sights in downtown Portland. Many of the African American families who had migrated to Portland during the war years found themselves facing particularly severe hardships during the Depression. Discriminatory hiring practices meant they were often the first to lose jobs and the last to be rehired when conditions improved. This economic marginalization would have lasting effects on Portland's racial dynamics for decades to come. The Bonneville Dam project, begun in 1933 as part of the New Deal's Public Works program, provided crucial employment for thousands of Portland area workers during the worst years of the Depression. This massive hydroelectric project not only created jobs, but also established the foundation for the region's future as a center for aluminum production and other energy-intensive industries. Portland's response to the Depression demonstrated both the resilience that had characterized the city throughout its history and new forms of social cooperation that would influence its future development. Neighborhood organizations, labor unions, and civic groups worked together to provide assistance to unemployed families and maintain community services when government resources proved inadequate. The Works Progress Administration and other New Deal programs left lasting marks on Portland's physical landscape. Public buildings constructed during this era, including schools, post offices, and recreational facilities, featured the distinctive architectural style of Depression-era federal projects. Many of these structures continue to serve Portland residents today, monuments to an era when government investment in public infrastructure was seen as essential to economic recovery. By the late 1930s, Portland had begun emerging from the worst effects of the Depression, though full recovery would not come until the next World War created another surge in demand for the city's industrial capacity. The lessons learned during the 1930s about economic diversification and community cooperation would prove valuable as Portland faced new challenges and opportunities in the turbulent decades ahead. The approaching Second World War would once again transform Portland into a major industrial centre, but this time the city would be better prepared to manage rapid growth and its aftermath. The experiences of boom and bust during the previous 3 decades had taught Portland's leaders valuable lessons about sustainable development and the importance of planning for long-term prosperity rather than short-term gain. When Pearl Harbor was attacked on December 7, 1941, Portland found itself thrust once again into the role of America's Pacific arsenal. But this time, the city's leaders were determined to avoid the chaotic boom and bust cycle that had characterized the previous war. The lessons of 1918 were still fresh in the minds of civic planners who had witnessed firsthand the social and economic disruption that followed the armistice. The Kaiser shipyards became the symbol of Portland's wartime transformation, but Henry Kaiser's approach differed dramatically from the haphazard expansion of World War I. His company constructed entire planned communities to house workers, complete with schools, hospitals, shopping centres, and recreational facilities. Vanport, built on the Columbia River floodplain, became Oregon's second-largest city almost overnight, home to more than 40,000 residents at its peak. This massive influx of workers created Portland's most diverse population in its history up to that point. African American families arrived from across the South in numbers that dwarfed the migration of the previous war. The city's black population grew from fewer than 2,000 residents in 1940 to nearly 25,000 by 1945, fundamentally altering Portland's demographic composition and social dynamics. Mexican American workers also arrived in significant numbers, many as part of the Bracero program that brought agricultural laborers to Oregon's farms before they transitioned to industrial work in Portland's shipyards and steel mills. This migration established Latino communities that would become permanent features of Portland's cultural landscape. Women again entered the industrial workforce in unprecedented numbers. But World War II saw even greater integration of female workers into traditionally male occupations. Portland's shipyards employed women as supervisors, crane operators, and skilled craftspeople, positions that represented significant advances beyond the basic assembly work available during the previous conflict. The scale of wartime production in the 1940s Portland exceeded even the ambitious targets of World War I. The Kaiser yards alone produced more than 750 ships during the conflict, including the famous Liberty ships that carried supplies to Allied forces around the globe. At peak production, Portland's shipyards were launching a new vessel every 4 days, a pace that amazed military planners and foreign observers alike. This industrial boom extended far beyond shipbuilding. Aluminum production, powered by cheap electricity from Bonneville Dam and other Columbia River hydroelectric projects, transformed the regional economy. The Reynolds Metals Company and other manufacturers established major facilities in the Portland area, creating an industrial base that would outlast the war and provide stable employment for generations of workers. The wartime economy also accelerated technological innovation in Portland. The city became a testing ground for new manufacturing techniques, quality control methods, and worker training programs that would influence American industry long after the war ended. Local universities expanded their engineering and technical programs to meet the demand for skilled personnel, establishing Portland's reputation as a center for applied research and development. Portland's port facilities underwent massive expansion to handle the volume of military cargo flowing to the Pacific Theater. New docks, warehouses, and rail connections transformed the waterfront into one of the most efficient cargo handling operations on the West Coast. These improvements positioned Portland to capitalize on post-war trade opportunities, particularly with Asian markets that were emerging as major economic partners. The social tensions that accompanied rapid population growth during World War II were more complex than those of the previous conflict. Housing shortages remained severe despite the construction of new communities like Vanport, leading to overcrowding and competition for accommodations. Racial tensions simmered beneath the surface as established residents struggled to adapt to Portland's new diversity. The federal government's decision to relocate Japanese Americans from the West Coast created another dimension of Portland's wartime experience. While most internees were sent to camps in eastern Oregon and other remote locations, some Portland families found themselves torn apart by policies that treated loyal American citizens as potential enemies. This shameful chapter in the city's history would not be fully acknowledged or addressed until decades later. Despite these challenges, Portland's wartime communities developed remarkable solidarity and mutual support. Neighborhood organizations, churches, and labor unions worked together to address housing shortages, provide childcare for working mothers, and maintain morale during the darkest periods of the conflict. These cooperative networks would prove crucial during the transition back to peacetime conditions. The end of World War II in 1945 brought familiar concerns about economic collapse and mass unemployment to Portland. However, the city's experience during the 1920s and 1930s had taught valuable lessons about managing post-war transitions. Instead of simply cancelling contracts and closing facilities, government and business leaders worked together to develop conversion plans that would maintain employment while shifting to civilian production. The GI Bill provided opportunities for thousands of Portland area veterans to attend college or receive technical training, creating a more skilled workforce than the city had ever possessed. Universities expanded their programs to accommodate returning servicemen, while vocational schools prepared workers for emerging industries that required specialized knowledge and training. Portland's post-war housing crisis reached tragic dimensions on May 30th, 1948, when the Columbia River flooded Vanport, destroying the entire community in a matter of hours. More than 18,000 residents lost their homes, and at least 15 people died in the disaster. The flood exposed the vulnerability of wartime housing construction and the inadequacy of emergency planning for such communities. The Vanport flood had profound implications for Portland's racial dynamics. Many of the displaced residents were African American families who found themselves unwelcome in other Portland neighborhoods due to discriminatory housing practices and restrictive covenants that prohibited sales to minorities. This housing segregation concentrated black families in limited areas of the city, creating patterns of residential separation that would persist for decades. Yet the 1950s also marked the beginning of Portland's emergence as a different kind of American city. The region's natural beauty, combined with its growing reputation for quality of life and environmental consciousness, began attracting residents who were drawn by lifestyle considerations rather than just economic opportunities. This migration of educated, environmentally aware newcomers would gradually reshape Portland's character and priorities. The completion of Interstate 5 through Portland in the late 1950s and early 1960s represented both an opportunity and a threat to the city's development. While the highway improved connections to Seattle and California, its construction, through established neighborhoods, destroyed communities and displaced thousands of residents, many of them minorities who lacked political power to resist the routing decisions. Urban renewal projects during this period reflected the prevailing belief that older neighborhoods could be improved through wholesale demolition and redevelopment. The destruction of much of Portland's historic downtown core during the 1960s eliminated buildings and streetscapes that had defined the city's character since the 19th century. Only later would residents recognize the cultural and architectural losses these projects represented. Portland's economy during the 1950s and early 1960s remained heavily dependent on traditional industries like lumber, agriculture, and shipping. However, the seeds of future diversification were being planted as technology companies began establishing operations in the region. The availability of skilled workers, proximity to universities, and quality of life advantages made Portland an attractive location for businesses seeking alternatives to more congested metropolitan areas. The environmental movement that would eventually become central to Portland's identity had its roots in the conservation battles of this era. Proposals to build dams on the Columbia River and its tributaries sparked organized opposition from groups that recognized the ecological value of free-flowing streams and wild salmon runs. These early environmental activists established precedents for citizen involvement in land use decisions that would later influence Portland's approach to urban planning. Cultural institutions flourished during Portland's post-war prosperity as residents gained both the leisure time and disposable income to support arts organizations and recreational activities. The Portland Art Museum expanded its collections and programs, while the Oregon Symphony achieved national recognition for the quality of its performances. These cultural amenities helped distinguish Portland from other cities of similar size and contributed to its growing reputation as a sophisticated urban center. The civil rights movement of the 1960s found expression in Portland through organized efforts to address discriminatory practices in housing, employment, and public accommodations. While the city's African American population remained relatively small compared to other metropolitan areas, local activists worked to eliminate barriers that limited opportunities for minority residents. These efforts would gain momentum during the following decade as Portland grappled with questions of social justice and equal opportunity. Higher education continued expanding during this period as Portland State College evolved into a full university and new institutions were established to serve the region's growing population. The presence of multiple universities and colleges created an intellectual atmosphere that attracted researchers, professionals, and creative individuals who would contribute to Portland's developing reputation as a center for innovation and alternative thinking. By the mid-1960s, Portland stood at a crossroads that would determine its future character. The city could continue following the path of most American metropolitan areas, emphasizing suburban sprawl, automobile dependence, and economic growth at any cost. Alternatively, Portland could chart a different course that prioritized environmental quality, urban livability, and sustainable development practices. The choice would not be made by government officials or business leaders alone, but through a democratic process that engaged citizens in fundamental questions about what kind of community they wanted Portland to become. The decisions made during the late 1960s and early 1970s would establish Portland's reputation as America's most innovative and environmentally conscious city, setting precedents that other communities would eventually seek to emulate. The stage was set for the transformation that would create modern Portland, a city where environmental activism, urban planning innovation, and countercultural values would merge into something entirely unique in the American urban experience. The foundation had been laid through decades of growth, crisis, and adaptation that had prepared Portland's residents for the bold experiments that lay ahead. The transformation began quietly, almost imperceptibly, in the coffee shops and bookstores of Northwest Portland during the late 1960s. Young people with long hair and unconventional ideas gathered to discuss everything from Vietnam War protests to organic farming techniques. These conversations might have remained merely academic exercises in other cities, but Portland's unique combination of circumstances created fertile ground for translating idealistic visions into practical reality. The election of Neil Goldschmidt as mayor in 1972 marked a turning point in Portland's political evolution. At just 32 years old, Goldschmidt represented a new generation of leadership that questioned fundamental assumptions about urban development. His administration embraced citizen participation in planning decisions, environmental protection, and alternative transportation modes that challenged the automobile-dominated thinking prevalent in most American cities. One of the most significant early battles involved the proposed Mount Hood Freeway, a massive highway project that would have carved through southeast Portland's established neighborhoods. Traditional planning wisdom supported the freeway as necessary for economic development and traffic flow, but a coalition of residents, environmentalists, and progressive politicians mounted unprecedented opposition to the project. The freeway fight became a defining moment for Portland's emerging identity. Neighborhood activists organized door-to-door campaigns, while environmental groups highlighted the ecological damage the highway would cause to local streams and wildlife habitats. Young professionals who had recently moved to Portland brought organizing skills learned from civil rights and anti-war movements to bear on local planning issues. In 1974, Portland made national headlines by becoming the first major American city to cancel a federally funded freeway project after construction had already begun. The decision to halt the Mount Hood Freeway sent shockwaves through transportation planning circles and established Portland as a place where citizens could successfully challenge expert recommendations when those plans conflicted with community values. The money originally allocated for freeway construction was redirected toward public transit improvements, launching Portland's reputation as a pioneer in alternative transportation. The Metropolitan Area Express, or MAX light rail system, began with a single line connecting downtown Portland to the eastern suburb of Gresham. This investment in rail transit reflected Portland's commitment to reducing automobile dependence while promoting compact, sustainable development patterns. Portland's embrace of environmental consciousness extended far beyond transportation planning. The city became an early adopter of recycling programs, solar energy initiatives, and green building practices that were considered radical experiments elsewhere. Local government actively encouraged bicycle commuting through the construction of dedicated bike lanes and secure parking facilities that made cycling a practical option for daily transportation. The urban growth boundary established in 1979 represented perhaps the most ambitious and controversial element of Portland's environmental agenda. This invisible line around the metropolitan area legally prohibited suburban sprawl beyond designated limits, forcing new development to occur within existing urban areas through infill and redevelopment projects. Critics argued that growth boundaries would drive up housing costs and limit economic expansion, while supporters insisted they were necessary to preserve agricultural land and natural areas. The growth boundary concept attracted national attention from urban planners seeking alternatives to the sprawling development patterns that characterized most American metropolitan areas. Delegations from cities across the country and around the world visited Portland to study how growth management policies actually functioned in practice. These visits enhanced Portland's reputation as a laboratory for innovative urban policies. Environmental activism in Portland during the 1970s and 1980s went far beyond government programs to encompass grassroots movements that challenged corporate practices and consumer culture. Earth First and other radical environmental groups organized protests against clear-cut logging in old-growth forests, often using civil disobedience tactics that resulted in mass arrests and national media coverage. The counterculture that flourished in Portland during this era embraced values that distinguished the city from both traditional conservative communities and conventional liberal urban areas. Residents celebrated local food production through farmers' markets that featured organic produce grown on small farms in the surrounding region. These markets became social gathering places where environmental concerns merged with support for local economic enterprises. Portland's music scene during the 1980s and 1990s reflected the city's alternative cultural identity through independent record labels, all-ages venues, and experimental artists who rejected mainstream commercial pressures. Bands like The Wipers, Dead Moon, and later Sleater Kinney gained national recognition while maintaining connections to Portland's underground music community. These musicians often performed in converted warehouses, coffee shops, and small clubs that fostered intimate relationships between artists and audiences. The city's literary culture flourished alongside its music scene, with Powell's books becoming a destination for readers from across the country. The massive independent bookstore occupied an entire city block and stayed open late into the evening, creating a space where writers, students, and intellectuals could browse, read, and engage in discussions about literature, politics, and culture. Powell's became emblematic of Portland's commitment to supporting local businesses over national chains. Food culture in Portland evolved during the 1980s and 1990s to emphasize local ingredients, innovative preparation techniques, and casual dining environments that rejected pretentious formality. Restaurants like Higgins and Paley's Place pioneered Northwest cuisine that celebrated regional ingredients such as Pacific salmon, Oregon hazelnuts, and Willamette Valley wines. These establishments influenced culinary trends that spread to other cities while maintaining distinctly Portland characteristics. The craft brewing movement found particularly fertile ground in Portland's culture of experimentation and local entrepreneurship. Breweries like Bridgeport, Widmer Brothers, and McMenamins established operations during the 1980s, when most American beer was produced by large national corporations offering limited variety. Portland's brewers emphasized quality, innovation, and connection to local communities through brew pubs that served food alongside their handcrafted beers. By 1990, Portland had more breweries per capita than any other American city, earning the nickname Beervana from enthusiasts who appreciated both the quantity and quality of local beer production. The success of Portland's brewing industry demonstrated how alternative economic approaches could thrive when supported by consumers who valued craftsmanship and local ownership over mass production and corporate efficiency. The technology sector began establishing a significant presence in Portland during the 1990s, attracted by the same quality of life factors that had drawn environmental activists and cultural innovators to the city. Companies like Nike, Intel, and later numerous software firms found that Portland offered educated workforces, reasonable operating costs, and lifestyle amenities that helped recruit talented employees from across the country. However, Portland's approach to economic development during this period emphasized sustainability and livability rather than growth at any cost. City policies encouraged businesses that supported environmental goals, paid living wages, and contributed to community well-being. This selective approach to economic development sometimes meant slower growth than other metropolitan areas experienced, but it also helped maintain the characteristics that made Portland attractive to residents and businesses alike. Gentrification emerged as a significant challenge during the 1990s as Portland's growing reputation attracted newcomers with higher incomes than many longtime residents possessed. Neighborhoods like the Pearl District and Hawthorne underwent dramatic transformations as industrial buildings were converted to expensive condominiums and trendy restaurants replaced long-established local businesses. These changes created tensions between preservation of community character and accommodation of population growth. The displacement of lower-income residents, particularly communities of color, became a persistent concern as property values rose throughout Portland's central neighborhoods. African American families who had lived in North Portland for generations found themselves priced out of areas where they had established deep community roots. These demographic shifts highlighted contradictions between Portland's progressive values and the practical effects of policies that attracted affluent newcomers. Portland's response to homelessness during this period reflected both the city's compassionate ideals and the practical limitations of local government resources. Service providers developed innovative programs that emphasized housing-first approaches and harm reduction strategies, but the scale of need often overwhelmed available funding. Tent cities and homeless camps became visible reminders that Portland's prosperity had not reached all residents equally. The 1999 World Trade Organization protests in nearby Seattle demonstrated Portland's connections to broader movements for economic justice and environmental protection. Many Portland activists participated in the demonstrations against corporate globalization, bringing back organizing strategies and political perspectives that influenced local campaigns around issues like sweatshop labor and fair trade practices. As the new millennium approached, Portland had established itself as America's most distinctive mid-sized city, a place where environmental consciousness, cultural creativity, and political innovation merged into something unprecedented in the American urban experience. The city's reputation attracted national media attention that both celebrated Portland's achievements and subjected its policies to intense scrutiny from critics who questioned whether alternative approaches to urban development could sustain continued growth and prosperity. The challenges facing Portland at the turn of the century reflected the success of its transformation from a traditional industrial city into something entirely different. Questions about affordable housing, transportation capacity, economic diversity, and social equity would test whether the values and policies that had shaped Portland's evolution could adapt to new circumstances while maintaining the characteristics that made the city unique. The dot-com boom and subsequent recession of the early 2000s provided the first major test of Portland's economic resilience in the post-industrial era. Technology companies that had established operations in Portland during the 1990s faced dramatic contractions, leading to widespread layoffs and office closures that affected both direct employees and the local businesses that had grown to serve the tech sector. However, Portland's diverse economic base and culture of entrepreneurship helped the city weather the recession better than many metropolitan areas that had become overly dependent on technology industries. Small businesses, creative enterprises, and manufacturing companies continued operating throughout the downturn, providing stability that prevented the complete economic collapse experienced in some other cities. The recovery period following the recession saw Portland embrace its reputation as a destination for creative professionals, artists, and entrepreneurs seeking alternatives to more expensive coastal cities. The creative class theory, popularized by urban theorist Richard Florida, identified Portland as an ideal environment for knowledge workers who valued cultural amenities, environmental quality, and lifestyle diversity over maximum economic returns. This influx of creative professionals contributed to Portland's growing reputation as a centre for design, advertising, architecture, and media production. Agencies like Wyden plus Kennedy gained international recognition for innovative advertising campaigns, while design firms and software companies established Portland as a significant player in creative industries that were becoming increasingly important to the national economy. The food cart phenomenon that emerged during the mid-2000s exemplified Portland's approach to economic development through small-scale entrepreneurship and cultural innovation. Vacant lots and underutilized spaces throughout the city became home to clusters of mobile food vendors offering everything from traditional ethnic cuisines to experimental fusion dishes that reflected Portland's diverse population and culinary creativity. Food carts provided opportunities for immigrant entrepreneurs and young chefs to establish businesses with minimal startup costs, while serving Portland's growing population of adventurous diners. The success of food cart pods demonstrated how alternative approaches to commercial development could activate urban spaces while supporting local economic enterprises that reflected community character rather than corporate standardization. Portland's commitment to sustainable development gained national recognition through green building initiatives that exceeded requirements in most other American cities. The city government established incentives for developers who incorporated renewable energy systems, water conservation measures, and environmentally friendly construction materials into their projects. These policies attracted businesses and residents who prioritized environmental responsibility while contributing to Portland's reputation as a leader in sustainable urban development. The bicycle infrastructure improvements that continued throughout the 2000s transformed Portland into America's most bicycle-friendly major city. Protected bike lanes, bicycle traffic signals, and secure parking facilities made cycling a practical transportation option for residents throughout the metropolitan area. The annual World Naked Bike Ride and other cycling events celebrated Portland's bicycle culture while drawing international attention to the city's alternative transportation achievements. Public transit expansion through additional MAX light rail lines and improved bus service reflected Portland's ongoing commitment to reducing automobile dependence while promoting compact development patterns. The streetcar system that began operating in 2001 connected downtown Portland to the Pearl District and other developing neighborhoods, demonstrating how transit investments could support urban redevelopment while maintaining environmental goals. Yet these transportation improvements also contributed to gentrification pressures that displaced long-time residents from neighborhoods served by new transit lines. Property values rose rapidly along streetcar and MAX routes as developers recognized the advantages of proximity to high-quality public transportation. This pattern of transit-oriented development achieved planning goals while creating affordability challenges that Portland continued struggling to address. The city's approach to managing growth and development during this period emphasized public participation and neighborhood input in planning decisions. But these democratic processes often favored educated, affluent residents who possessed the time and knowledge necessary to navigate complex bureaucratic procedures. Lower-income communities and communities of color frequently found themselves underrepresented in planning processes that significantly affected their neighborhoods and daily lives. Portland's cultural scene continued evolving throughout the 2000s as the city gained recognition for television shows like Portlandia that both celebrated and satirized local cultural phenomena. The sketch comedy series highlighted Portland's reputation for environmental consciousness, artisanal food production, and unconventional lifestyle choices, while also poking fun at the pretensions and contradictions of progressive urban culture. The national attention generated by Portlandia and other media coverage attracted new residents who were drawn by Portland's reputation for creativity, environmental awareness, and alternative lifestyles. However, this influx of newcomers seeking an authentic Portland experience sometimes contributed to the commercialization and transformation of the very cultural characteristics that had made the city distinctive in the first place. Music venues, independent bookstores, and other cultural institutions that had defined Portland's alternative identity faced increasing pressure from rising rents and changing neighborhood demographics. Long-established businesses found themselves unable to compete with chains and franchises that could afford higher lease payments, leading to concerns about the homogenization of Portland's once distinctive commercial districts. The Great Recession of 2008 to 2009 tested Portland's economic resilience once again, but the city's diverse economic base and culture of innovation helped maintain stability during the national financial crisis. Local banks had avoided the risky lending practices that devastated financial institutions elsewhere, while Portland's emphasis on small businesses and local economic circulation provided some insulation from broader economic turmoil. Recovery from the recession accelerated Portland's emergence as a destination for millennials and other young professionals seeking affordable alternatives to expensive coastal cities like San Francisco and Seattle. The combination of relatively low housing costs, abundant cultural amenities, and environmental quality made Portland attractive to educated workers in technology, design, and creative industries who could often work remotely or establish their own businesses. This demographic shift brought both opportunities and challenges as Portland's population growth accelerated beyond the city's capacity to accommodate new residents without significant changes to established neighborhoods and cultural institutions. The tension between maintaining Portland's distinctive character while adapting to rapid growth would define the city's development challenges for the decade that followed, as Portland grappled with success that threatened to undermine the very qualities that had made it successful in the first place. The housing crisis that emerged during the 2010s forced Portland to confront fundamental contradictions between its progressive ideals and the realities of urban development in a market economy. As property values soared and long-time residents found themselves displaced from neighborhoods their families had called home for generations, the city struggled to balance growth management with affordability concerns that threatened to undermine its reputation for inclusivity and social justice. The rapid pace of development during this period transformed entire districts almost overnight. The Alberta Arts District, once a vibrant centre of African American culture and community life, experienced gentrification so dramatic that most of its original residents and businesses were forced to relocate to more affordable areas. Similar patterns played out across North and Northeast Portland, where historically black neighborhoods became predominantly white as property values increased beyond the reach of existing residents. Portland's response to the housing crisis reflected both innovative policy approaches and the limitations of local government authority in addressing market-driven displacement. The city implemented inclusionary zoning requirements that mandated affordable housing units in new developments, while also establishing tenant protection measures designed to prevent arbitrary rent increases and no-cause evictions that had become common throughout rapidly gentrifying neighborhoods. However, these policy interventions often proved insufficient to counteract broader economic forces that were reshaping Portland's demographic composition. The tech industry boom in nearby Seattle created spillover effects that brought high-income workers to Portland seeking more affordable housing options, while remote work arrangements allowed professionals from expensive coastal cities to relocate while maintaining their previous salaries. The homeless crisis that intensified throughout the 2010s became perhaps the most visible symbol of Portland's growing inequality and affordability challenges. Tent encampments appeared in parks, under bridges, and along sidewalks throughout the city, creating public health and safety concerns while highlighting the inadequacy of existing social services and housing assistance programs. Portland's approach to homelessness emphasized compassionate policies that prioritized housing assistance over criminalization, but the scale of need consistently overwhelmed available resources. The city established sanctioned camping areas and tiny house villages as temporary solutions, while also investing in permanent supportive housing programs designed to address the underlying causes of homelessness rather than just its symptoms. The opioid epidemic that swept across America during this period found particularly tragic expression in Portland, where liberal drug policies and inadequate treatment resources created conditions that attracted people struggling with addiction from across the region. Downtown Portland's core areas experienced significant deterioration as open drug use and related criminal activity increased, challenging the city's reputation for livability and public safety. Business owners and residents in affected neighborhoods organized to demand more aggressive law enforcement responses to drug-related crime, while advocates for people experiencing homelessness and addiction emphasized the need for expanded treatment services and harm reduction programs. These competing approaches to public health and safety issues reflected broader tensions within Portland's progressive coalition about how to address complex social problems. The climate change movement gained new urgency in Portland during the late 2000s as residents witnessed firsthand the effects of rising temperatures and changing weather patterns on the Pacific Northwest. Unprecedented heat waves, wildfire smoke that blanketed the city for weeks, and increasingly severe winter storms demonstrated that environmental challenges were no longer abstract future concerns, but immediate threats to public health and quality of life. Portland's response to climate change built upon its existing foundation of environmental policies while embracing more ambitious goals for carbon reduction and renewable energy adoption. The city committed to achieving carbon neutrality by 2050 through aggressive targets for building efficiency, transportation electrification, and renewable energy deployment that positioned Portland as a leader among American cities addressing climate change. The urban forestry program that had distinguished Portland for decades faced new challenges as climate change stressed trees that had thrived in the region's historically mild, wet climate. City foresters worked to identify species better adapted to warmer, drier conditions, while maintaining the canopy cover that contributed so significantly to Portland's livability and environmental benefits. Electric vehicle adoption accelerated rapidly in Portland as residents embraced both environmental benefits and the practical advantages of reduced fuel costs and maintenance requirements. The city invested heavily in charging infrastructure while also promoting electric bicycles and scooters that provided alternatives to automobile travel for shorter trips throughout the metropolitan area. The food scene that had become central to Portland's identity continued evolving throughout this period as local restaurants gained national recognition for innovative approaches to Pacific Northwest cuisine. Celebrity chefs and food media attention brought increased visibility to Portland's culinary culture, but also contributed to rising restaurant costs and the displacement of long-time neighborhood establishments that could no longer afford increasing commercial rents. Food trucks evolved from quirky local phenomena into sophisticated mobile restaurants that served everything from traditional ethnic cuisines to experimental dishes that pushed culinary boundaries. The success of Portland's food truck culture inspired similar developments in cities across America, while also demonstrating how small-scale entrepreneurship could thrive within supportive regulatory environments. The craft brewing industry that had flourished in Portland since the 1980s reached new levels of sophistication and market penetration during the 2010s. Local breweries expanded their operations to serve regional and national markets, while maintaining connections to Portland's beer culture through tap rooms, festivals, and collaborative projects that celebrated the community aspects of craft brewing. However, the success of Portland's brewing industry also attracted acquisition interest from large corporations seeking to capitalize on craft beer's popularity. Several iconic Portland breweries were purchased by multinational companies, raising concerns about maintaining the independence and community focus that had characterized the local brewing scene since its inception. The technology sector continued expanding its presence in Portland throughout this period, with companies like Nike's headquarters driving innovation in athletic wear design and digital marketing, while software firms established significant operations that competed for talent with Seattle and Silicon Valley employers. Portland's reputation for work-life balance and environmental quality helped attract workers who prioritized lifestyle considerations over maximum compensation. Yet the growth of high-paying technology jobs also contributed to housing affordability challenges, as tech workers could outbid long-time residents for homes in desirable neighborhoods. The economic benefits of technology sector expansion were unevenly distributed, creating wealth gaps that challenged Portland's self-image as an egalitarian community where diverse residents could afford to live and work. The protests that erupted in Portland during 2020 following the death of George Floyd reflected both the city's progressive political culture and deep frustrations with persistent racial inequalities that contradicted Portland's liberal reputation. Demonstrations that began as peaceful expressions of solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement evolved into sustained confrontations between protesters and federal law enforcement officers that brought national attention to Portland for months. The intensity and duration of Portland's protests surprised many observers who had viewed the city primarily through the lens of quirky cultural phenomena rather than serious political activism. However, the demonstrations reflected long-standing tensions within Portland's progressive coalition about whether symbolic gestures and policy reforms were sufficient to address structural inequalities that affected communities of color throughout the metropolitan area. Federal intervention in Portland's protests created unprecedented tensions between local and national government authorities, as city officials objected to the deployment of federal agents who used aggressive tactics against protesters and journalists. These confrontations highlighted Portland's role as a symbol of resistance to conservative policies, while also exposing divisions within the community about appropriate responses to civil unrest. The economic disruptions caused by the COVID-19 pandemic tested Portland's resilience in ways that few residents had anticipated when the city shut down in March 2020. Restaurants, bars, entertainment venues, and small businesses that formed the backbone of Portland's distinctive cultural economy faced existential threats as public health measures eliminated their customer base almost overnight. Portland's response to the pandemic reflected both its collaborative civic culture and the limitations of local government resources in addressing public health emergencies of unprecedented scale. The city worked with business organizations and community groups to develop outdoor dining programs, small business assistance initiatives, and public health measures that balanced economic needs with safety requirements. Remote work arrangements that became widespread during the pandemic accelerated existing trends toward geographic mobility as workers discovered they could live in Portland while working for employers based elsewhere. This development brought new residents to Portland while also enabling some longtime residents to remain in the city despite limited local employment opportunities in their fields. The combination of pandemic-related economic disruption, ongoing housing affordability challenges, and social unrest created conditions that tested Portland's capacity to maintain the livability and community cohesion that had distinguished the city for decades. Some residents and businesses relocated to other areas, while others doubled down on their commitment to Portland's values and potential for positive change. As Portland entered the 2020s, the city faced questions that would determine whether its distinctive character could survive the pressures of continued growth, economic inequality, climate change, and political polarization that challenged communities across America. The choices made during this critical period would establish whether Portland could evolve while maintaining the environmental consciousness, cultural creativity, and civic engagement that had made it unique among American cities. The pandemic's aftermath revealed both Portland's vulnerabilities and its potential for adaptation as residents and institutions worked to rebuild community connections while addressing persistent challenges around housing, public safety, economic opportunity, and environmental sustainability. The city that had emerged from a coin flip between two New England place names continued wrestling with fundamental questions about identity, inclusion, and the possibility of creating urban communities that balanced individual freedom with collective responsibility. Portland's story remained unfinished as the city approached its 181st anniversary, still evolving in response to forces both internal and external that would shape its character for generations to come. The lessons learned through decades of experimentation with alternative approaches to urban development provided both inspiration and cautionary examples for other communities seeking to chart their own paths towards sustainable, equitable, and livable cities, able cities. The signs of change were everywhere by 2021, though they manifested differently across Portland's diverse neighborhoods. Downtown streets that had once bustled with office workers and tourists stood eerily quiet as remote work arrangements emptied high-rise buildings and pandemic restrictions kept visitors away. Yet in residential areas throughout the city, a different kind of energy emerged as people rediscovered their local communities and invested in neighborhood connections that had been neglected during busier times. The retail landscape underwent dramatic transformations as national chains struggled with changing consumer patterns, while local businesses adapted with remarkable creativity. Independent bookstores expanded their online operations and outdoor events. Breweries developed sophisticated takeout and delivery systems, and restaurants reimagined themselves as community gathering spaces that could function safely under evolving health guidelines. These adaptations demonstrated the resilience and innovation that had characterized Portland's business community since the city's earliest days. Housing patterns shifted as well, with many residents leaving expensive, close-in neighborhoods for more affordable areas that offered larger living spaces suitable for remote work arrangements. This migration created new pressures on outer neighborhoods that had previously been overlooked by development interests, while also providing opportunities for long-time residents to access areas of the city that had become unaffordable during the preceding decade's rapid gentrification. The climate challenges that had been building throughout the previous decade reached crisis proportions during the summer of 2021, when unprecedented heat waves killed hundreds of Pacific Northwest residents and demonstrated the inadequacy of existing infrastructure for extreme weather events. Portland's response included emergency cooling centres, tree planting initiatives, and building code revisions designed to protect residents from future heat emergencies. Urban agriculture gained new prominence as residents sought greater food security and connection to local production systems. Community gardens expanded throughout the metropolitan area, while policies encouraging backyard food production and small-scale farming within city limits reflected Portland's ongoing commitment to sustainability and local self-reliance. These initiatives built upon the urban farming movement that had been growing since the 1970s, while addressing contemporary concerns about supply chain resilience. The transportation sector experienced fundamental changes as reduced commuting patterns altered traffic flows throughout the region. Public transit agencies adapted their services to serve new travel patterns while maintaining commitments to reducing automobile dependence and supporting transit-oriented development. Bicycle usage increased dramatically as people sought safe outdoor activities and alternatives to public transportation during periods of heightened health concerns. Electric vehicle adoption accelerated beyond previous projections as federal incentives combined with environmental consciousness and rising gasoline prices to make electric cars attractive to mainstream consumers. Portland's charging infrastructure expanded rapidly to accommodate growing demand, while local utilities worked to ensure that increased electricity consumption came from renewable sources rather than fossil fuel generation. The cultural institutions that had defined Portland's identity for decades faced existential challenges, as attendance restrictions and economic uncertainty threatened their financial viability. Music venues, theatres, art galleries, and museums developed innovative programs that reached audiences through digital platforms while maintaining connections to local communities through outdoor events and socially distanced programming. Powell's books, perhaps the most iconic symbol of Portland's literary culture, navigated the pandemic by expanding online sales while maintaining its role as a community gathering space through author events, reading groups, and educational programs that adapted to changing public health requirements. The bookstore's survival demonstrated the deep community support that sustained Portland's independent cultural institutions through unprecedented challenges. Food culture continued evolving as restaurants developed sophisticated takeout operations that maintained the quality and creativity that had made Portland's dining scene nationally renowned. Food trucks adapted their locations and service models to reach customers in residential neighborhoods, while farmers markets implemented safety protocols that allowed local producers to maintain direct relationships with consumers throughout the crisis period. The craft brewing industry that had become synonymous with Portland's identity faced particular challenges, as taproom closures eliminated the social aspects of beer consumption that had driven much of the craft brewing movement. Breweries invested heavily in packaging equipment and distribution networks while developing outdoor seating areas and delivery services that maintained connections with customers during restrictions on indoor gatherings. Educational institutions underwent rapid transformations as universities and schools adapted to remote learning requirements while maintaining their commitments to student success and community engagement. Portland State University and other local colleges developed hybrid programs that combined online instruction with safe in-person experiences, while public schools worked to address educational equity issues that became more apparent during distance learning periods. The technology sector that had grown significantly in Portland during the previous decade experienced mixed effects from pandemic-related changes. While some companies struggled with disrupted operations and reduced demand, others benefited from accelerated adoption of digital services and remote work technologies. Portland's reputation for work-life balance became even more attractive to technology workers seeking alternatives to high-stress, high-cost metropolitan areas. Social justice movements that had gained momentum during 2020 continued advocating for policy changes that would address systemic inequalities in housing, education, criminal justice, and economic opportunity. These efforts reflected Portland's progressive political culture while also highlighting persistent gaps between the city's idealistic aspirations and the lived experiences of communities that had been marginalized despite decades of liberal governance. The homeless crisis that had intensified throughout the previous decade reached new dimensions during the pandemic, as economic disruptions increased the number of people experiencing housing insecurity, while also limiting the capacity of service providers to offer assistance. Portland's response included emergency rental assistance programs, expanded temporary housing options, and innovative partnerships between government agencies and community organisations. Environmental justice emerged as a central concern as residents recognised that climate change impacts and pollution burdens fell disproportionately on communities of colour and low-income neighbourhoods. Portland's environmental policies began incorporating equity considerations more systematically, while also addressing legacy contamination and infrastructure deficiencies that had created health disparities across different parts of the metropolitan area. The urban forest that had been a source of pride for Portland residents faced new threats from climate change, invasive species, and development pressures that required adaptive management strategies. City foresters worked with community groups to identify tree species better suited to changing climate conditions, while also expanding canopy coverage in neighbourhoods that had been underserved by previous urban forestry investments. Water management became increasingly complex as Portland's utility systems adapted to changing precipitation patterns that included both severe droughts and intense storm events. The city's investments in green infrastructure, stormwater management, and water conservation reflected both environmental commitments and practical necessities for maintaining reliable utility services under changing conditions. Public space programming evolved to serve communities that were spending more time in their neighbourhoods, while also accommodating public health requirements for outdoor activities. Parks and recreation departments developed innovative programming that brought cultural events, educational opportunities, and fitness activities to neighbourhood locations while maintaining the accessibility that had characterised Portland's approach to public services. Arts organisations adapted to changing conditions through outdoor programming, digital platforms, and community partnerships that maintained cultural vitality despite venue restrictions and reduced audiences. These adaptations often strengthened connections between artists and neighbourhoods, while also demonstrating the resilience and creativity that had always characterised Portland's cultural community. The regional economy began showing signs of recovery by late 2021 as businesses reopened and consumer confidence gradually returned, though patterns of economic activity had shifted significantly from pre-pandemic norms. Portland's diverse economic base, which included manufacturing, technology, healthcare, education, and creative industries, provided stability during the recovery period, while also creating opportunities for new forms of economic development. Small business development programs expanded to support entrepreneurs who had been particularly affected by pandemic disruptions, while also encouraging innovations in business models, customer service, and community engagement. These initiatives built upon Portland's long-standing commitment to local economic development, while addressing contemporary challenges around supply chain reliability, workforce development, and digital commerce. Community organisations that had provided essential services during the pandemic's most difficult periods continued expanding their roles in neighbourhood support networks, mutual aid programmes, and advocacy for policy changes that would address root causes of community challenges. These grassroots efforts demonstrated the civic engagement and social cohesion that had characterised Portland's response to previous crises, while also highlighting the capacity for community-led solutions to complex problems. The regional planning processes that had distinguished Portland since the 1970s continued evolving to address new challenges around climate resilience, economic equity, and community health, while maintaining commitments to growth management and environmental protection. These planning efforts involved extensive community engagement that sought to incorporate diverse perspectives and priorities into decisions about transportation investments, housing policies, and economic development strategies. Immigration patterns shifted during this period as Portland attracted newcomers seeking alternatives to more expensive coastal cities, while also experiencing out-migration from residents seeking more affordable housing options or different lifestyle preferences. These demographic changes created both opportunities for cultural enrichment and challenges around maintaining community cohesion and affordable housing availability. Higher education institutions adapted their research and community engagement programs to address contemporary challenges around public health, environmental sustainability, social justice, and economic development. Universities and colleges strengthened partnerships with community organisations, government agencies, and businesses to ensure that academic resources contributed effectively to addressing regional priorities and community needs. The media landscape continued fragmenting as residents increasingly relied on social media, podcasts, and specialised publications for information about local issues, while traditional newspapers struggled with declining revenues and reduced staff capacity. This information ecosystem created both opportunities for diverse voices and perspectives, while also raising concerns about misinformation and the capacity for informed democratic participation in local decision-making processes. Cultural identity questions that had been simmering beneath Portland's progressive reputation came into sharper focus as residents grappled with questions about gentrification, racial equity, economic inclusion, and the relationship between individual lifestyle choices and collective community well-being. These discussions reflected both the city's commitment to self-examination and the complexity of translating idealistic values into practical policies that served all residents effectively. By 2022, Portland had demonstrated remarkable adaptability in responding to multiple concurrent crises while maintaining many of the characteristics that had distinguished the city for decades. The combination of environmental consciousness, cultural creativity, civic engagement, and economic innovation continued attracting residents and businesses seeking alternatives to conventional metropolitan development patterns, even as the city grappled with persistent challenges around affordability, equity, and sustainability. The lessons learned during this period of unprecedented disruption provided valuable insights for other communities seeking to build resilience and adaptability into their own development strategies. Portland's experience demonstrated both the possibilities and limitations of local government action in addressing complex social challenges, while also highlighting the crucial role of community organisations, businesses, and individual residents in creating positive change. As Portland approached its 185th anniversary in 2025, the city continued evolving in response to forces both familiar and unprecedented. The timber industry that had founded the city's economy remained present through sustainable forestry practices and wood products manufacturing, while technology companies and creative enterprises represented the contemporary economy that had emerged from decades of diversification efforts. The environmental movement that had shaped Portland's identity since the 1970s continued adapting to address climate change impacts, while also incorporating environmental justice principles that recognized the interconnections between ecological health and social equity. These efforts built upon Portland's legacy of environmental leadership while addressing contemporary challenges that required more comprehensive and inclusive approaches to sustainability. The countercultural values that had attracted generations of residents seeking alternatives to mainstream American lifestyles remained evident throughout Portland's neighborhoods, businesses, and cultural institutions, though these values had evolved to encompass broader definitions of diversity, inclusion, and community well-being. The tension between maintaining Portland's distinctive character while adapting to growth and change continued defining the city's development trajectory. Portland's story reflected broader themes in American urban development, while also demonstrating the possibilities for communities that were willing to experiment with alternative approaches to the challenges facing contemporary cities. The combination of citizen engagement, environmental consciousness, cultural creativity, and economic innovation that had emerged from decades of local organising and policy innovation provided models for other communities seeking to create more sustainable, equitable, and livable urban environments. The future remained unwritten as Portland's residents continued working to balance competing priorities around growth management, economic development, social equity, environmental protection, and cultural preservation. The choices made during the coming decade would determine whether Portland could maintain its distinctive character while adapting to new challenges and opportunities that would shape the city's trajectory for generations to come. The challenges that defined Portland's character during the early 2020s began crystallizing into new patterns of urban life as the decade progressed. Remote work arrangements that had initially seemed temporary became permanent fixtures of the regional economy, fundamentally altering commuting patterns and neighborhood dynamics throughout the metropolitan area. Downtown office buildings stood partially empty while residential districts experienced unprecedented activity as people worked from home offices, coffee shops, and co-working spaces scattered throughout the city. This transformation of work patterns created ripple effects that touched every aspect of Portland's economy and social life. Restaurants that had relied on lunch crowds from office workers pivoted to serve neighborhood residents throughout the day, while transit agencies redesigned routes to accommodate new travel patterns that emphasized off-peak trips and reverse commuting. The change challenged fundamental assumptions about urban development that had guided Portland's planning decisions for decades. Local businesses adapted with characteristic creativity and resilience, developing hybrid models that combined physical locations with digital services in ways that strengthened community connections rather than replacing them. Independent bookstores expanded their online presence while hosting outdoor reading groups. Breweries developed sophisticated delivery systems while maintaining taproom culture, and retailers created appointment-based shopping experiences that provided personalized service in safely managed environments. The housing market experienced dramatic fluctuations as changing work patterns influenced residential preferences and migration flows. Many residents sought larger living spaces that could accommodate home offices, driving demand for houses with yards and separate work areas. This shift created new pressures on outer neighborhoods, while potentially easing gentrification in some central districts as rental demand decreased in areas that had been prized primarily for their proximity to downtown employment centers. Transportation infrastructure investments that had been planned for traditional commuting patterns required reassessment as ridership patterns evolved. The MAX light rail system experienced significant ridership declines, while bicycle usage increased dramatically as people sought safe outdoor activities and alternatives to public transportation during health emergencies. These changes prompted discussions about transportation priorities and infrastructure investments that would serve evolving community needs. The climate impacts that had been building throughout the previous decade intensified with each passing year, requiring increasingly sophisticated adaptation strategies. Urban heat island effects became life-threatening during extreme temperature events, prompting emergency response protocols and infrastructure improvements designed to protect vulnerable residents. Air quality emergencies from wildfire smoke became annual occurrences that required coordinated regional responses involving schools, healthcare systems, and community organizations. Portland's urban forest faced unprecedented stresses from drought, heat, disease, and invasive species that threatened the tree canopy that had been central to the city's identity and environmental benefits. City foresters worked with community volunteers to plant climate-adapted species, while also implementing emergency watering programs during extreme weather events. These efforts reflected both practical necessities and symbolic commitments to maintaining Portland's green character under changing environmental conditions. Water management became increasingly complex as precipitation patterns shifted toward more intense but less frequent storm events, alternating with extended dry periods. The city's innovative stormwater management systems, which had been developed over decades to handle traditional rainfall patterns, required modifications to accommodate these new extremes. Green infrastructure investments expanded to include rain gardens, permeable surfaces, and natural drainage systems that could handle both flooding and drought conditions. Energy systems underwent rapid transformation as renewable sources became economically competitive with fossil fuels, while also providing greater resilience against supply disruptions and price volatility. Portland's utilities invested heavily in solar installations, battery storage systems, and grid modernization projects that enabled greater integration of distributed, renewable energy sources. These infrastructure improvements supported both environmental goals and economic development as businesses and residents sought reliable, affordable, and clean energy sources. The food system that had been a source of pride for Portland residents faced new challenges as climate change affected regional agriculture, while supply chain disruptions highlighted vulnerabilities in long-distance food distribution networks. Urban agriculture initiatives expanded rapidly as residents sought greater food security and connection to local production systems. Community gardens, backyard food production, and small-scale farming within city limits became more common as policies encouraged local food production and distribution systems. Cultural institutions that had defined Portland's identity for decades continued adapting to changing community needs and operational constraints. Museums developed outdoor exhibition spaces and digital programming that reached new audiences while maintaining connections to local communities. Music venues created outdoor performance areas and socially distanced programming that preserved live music culture while accommodating public health requirements. These adaptations often strengthened community connections while demonstrating institutional resilience and creativity. The technology sector, that had grown significantly in Portland during the previous decade, experienced mixed effects from changing work patterns and economic conditions. While some companies struggled with disrupted operations and reduced demand, others benefited from accelerated adoption of digital services and distributed work arrangements. Portland's reputation for work-life balance and environmental quality became even more attractive to technology workers seeking alternatives to high-stress metropolitan areas with extreme living costs. Educational institutions underwent fundamental changes as remote learning technologies that had been rapidly deployed during emergency conditions evolved into sophisticated hybrid programs that combined online instruction with carefully designed in-person experiences. Portland State University and other regional colleges developed innovative approaches to student engagement that maintained educational quality while providing flexibility for diverse student needs and circumstances. Public health infrastructure that had been strained during the pandemic received significant investments designed to improve community resilience against future health emergencies. Healthcare systems expanded telemedicine capabilities while also strengthening community-based prevention programs that address social determinants of health, including housing, nutrition, and environmental quality. These investments reflected both lessons learned from recent experiences and long-term commitments to health equity that had been priorities for Portland's progressive political culture. Social justice movements that had gained prominence during 2020 continued advocating for policy changes that would address structural inequalities in housing, education, criminal justice, and economic opportunity. These efforts resulted in concrete policy reforms, including tenant protection measures, police accountability initiatives, and workforce development programs. designed to create pathways to economic mobility for communities that had been historically marginalized. Housing policy became increasingly sophisticated as city officials recognized that affordability challenges required comprehensive approaches that addressed both market rate development and subsidized housing, while also preventing displacement of existing residents. Inclusionary zoning requirements, community land trust programs, and tenant protection measures represented attempts to balance development incentives with affordability preservation that reflected Portland's ongoing commitment to economic diversity. Environmental justice emerged as a central framework for addressing climate change impacts and pollution burdens that fell disproportionately on communities of color and low-income neighborhoods. Portland's environmental policies began systematically incorporating equity considerations while also addressing legacy contamination and infrastructure deficiencies that had created health disparities across different parts of the metropolitan area. Community organizations that had provided essential services during crisis periods continued expanding their roles in neighborhood support networks, mutual aid programs, and advocacy for policy changes that would address root causes of community challenges. These grassroots efforts demonstrated the civic engagement and social cohesion that had characterized Portland's response to previous crises, while also highlighting the capacity for community-led solutions to complex problems. Regional planning processes that had distinguished Portland since the 1970s evolved to address new challenges around climate resilience, economic equity, and community health, while maintaining commitments to growth management and environmental protection. These planning efforts involved extensive community engagement that sought to incorporate diverse perspectives and priorities into decisions about transportation investments, housing policies, and economic development strategies. Immigration patterns shifted as Portland attracted newcomers seeking alternatives to more expensive coastal cities, while also experiencing outmigration from residents seeking more affordable housing options or different lifestyle preferences. These demographic changes created both opportunities for cultural enrichment and challenges around maintaining community cohesion and affordable housing availability for diverse income levels. Arts organizations adapted to changing conditions through outdoor programming, digital platforms, and community partnerships that maintained cultural vitality despite venue restrictions and reduced traditional funding sources. These adaptations often strengthened connections between artists and neighborhoods, while also demonstrating the resilience and creativity that had always characterized Portland's cultural community. Small business development programs expanded to support entrepreneurs who had been particularly affected by economic disruptions, while also encouraging innovations in business models, customer service, and community engagement. These initiatives built upon Portland's long-standing commitment to local economic development while addressing contemporary challenges around supply chain reliability, workforce development, and digital commerce integration. The regional economy showed signs of structural transformation as traditional industries adapted to new technologies and market conditions while emerging sectors gained prominence. Manufacturing operations increasingly emphasized automation and sustainable production methods, while service industries developed more sophisticated approaches to customer engagement and community connection. These changes reflected both technological advancement and evolving consumer preferences that prioritized local production, environmental responsibility, and authentic community relationships. Media landscapes continued fragmenting as residents increasingly relied on diverse information sources, including social media, podcasts, community newsletters, and specialized publications for news about local issues. This information ecosystem created opportunities for diverse voices and perspectives, while also raising concerns about misinformation and the capacity for informed democratic participation in local decision-making processes. Cultural identity questions that had been simmering beneath Portland's progressive reputation continued evolving as residents grappled with questions about gentrification, racial equity, economic inclusion, and the relationship between individual lifestyle choices and collective community well-being. These discussions reflected both the city's commitment to self-examination and the complexity of translating idealistic values into practical policies that served all residents effectively. The combination of environmental consciousness, cultural creativity, civic engagement, and economic innovation that had attracted residents and businesses to Portland for decades continued evolving to address contemporary challenges while maintaining the characteristics that made the city distinctive among American metropolitan areas. The balance between preservation and adaptation remained central to Portland's ongoing development as residents worked to maintain community character while accommodating necessary changes. By the mid-2020s, Portland had demonstrated remarkable capacity for adaptation and innovation in response to multiple concurrent challenges while maintaining many of the values and characteristics that had distinguished the city for decades. The lessons learned during this period of unprecedented disruption provided valuable insights for other communities seeking to build resilience and adaptability into their own development strategies, while also highlighting both the possibilities and limitations of local action in addressing complex social and environmental challenges. The environmental challenges. Portland's evolution into the 2020s revealed a city wrestling with the consequences of its own success. The very qualities that had made the city attractive to creative professionals, environmental advocates, and young entrepreneurs had also triggered transformations that challenged the community's ability to remain accessible to diverse residents. Housing costs that had seemed manageable compared to coastal cities like San Francisco and Seattle began approaching levels that pushed working families toward distant suburbs or out of the region entirely. The irony was not lost on longtime residents who had witnessed Portland's transformation from a gritty industrial city into a destination for lifestyle migrants seeking authenticity and environmental consciousness. The food carts that had begun as scrappy entrepreneurial ventures by immigrant families and young chefs evolved into sophisticated culinary enterprises that attracted food tourists from around the world. Yet this success often priced out the very communities that had created the cultural diversity that made Portland's food scene distinctive in the first place. Neighborhoods that had been home to multi-generational families found themselves transformed almost overnight as property speculators recognized opportunities in areas that had been overlooked during previous development cycles. The Alberta Arts District, which had served as a cultural center for Portland's African American community since the 1960s, became a symbol of both Portland's creative energy and its inability to prevent displacement of the communities that had nurtured that creativity through decades of neglect and disinvestment. These changes prompted soul-searching conversations about what Portland actually represented and whether progressive political values could coexist with market forces that seemed to operate according to their own logic, regardless of community intentions. The city that had prided itself on citizen participation in planning decisions discovered that democratic processes often favored residents who possessed the time, education, and cultural capital necessary to navigate complex bureaucratic procedures effectively. Community meetings that were intended to ensure inclusive decision-making frequently attracted primarily white, college-educated homeowners whose perspectives and priorities did not necessarily reflect the needs of renters, recent immigrants, or families struggling with economic insecurity. The very mechanisms that had been designed to prevent top-down development decisions sometimes reproduced existing inequalities in more subtle but equally effective ways. Portland's response to these challenges reflected both the creativity that had characterized the city's approach to urban problems and the limitations of local government authority in addressing issues that originated from from broader economic and social forces. Inclusionary zoning requirements that mandated affordable units in new developments represented attempts to capture some of the value created by public investments for community benefit, while tenant protection measures sought to prevent the most egregious forms of displacement through rent control and just cause eviction requirements. Yet these policy interventions often proved insufficient to counteract market pressures that operated at regional, national, and even global scales. Investment capital flowing from wealthy metropolitan areas sought opportunities in cities like Portland, where property values remained below peaks reached in coastal markets, creating bidding wars that local residents could not hope to win. The financialization of housing that had transformed real estate into an asset class for international investors reached Portland despite the city's efforts to maintain local control over development patterns. The technology sector that had been welcomed as a source of diversification and high-paying employment began generating concerns about its effects on community character and economic inequality. Companies like Nike had deep roots in the Portland area and maintained commitments to local community development, but newer firms often operated with less connection to regional culture and priorities. The influx of highly compensated technology workers created demand for amenities and services that catered to their preferences, while displacing businesses that had served long-time residents. Food trucks evolved from affordable options for working-class families into gourmet destinations that charged premium prices for artisanal preparations of traditional ethnic cuisines. The transformation reflected both the entrepreneurial success of individual operators and broader trends toward the commodification of cultural authenticity that characterized gentrification processes throughout American cities. Breweries that had begun as neighborhood gathering places increasingly operated as regional or national brands that marketed Portland's reputation for craft beer excellence to consumers who might never visit the city. The success of Portland's brewing industry demonstrated the potential for local businesses to achieve national recognition while maintaining community connections, but it also illustrated how cultural products could become detached from their original social contexts through commercial expansion. Music venues that had nurtured Portland's underground culture faced increasing pressure from noise complaints, rising rents, and changing neighborhood demographics that prioritized residential amenities over nightlife options. The loss of venues like Satyricon and other legendary clubs represented more than just the closure of businesses. It symbolized the erosion of cultural infrastructure that had supported artistic communities for decades. Independent bookstores, record shops, and other cultural institutions that had defined Portland's alternative identity struggled to compete with online retailers and chain stores that could afford higher commercial rents. Powell's books remained a symbol of Portland's literary culture, but many smaller bookstores and specialty shops closed as foot traffic declined and operating costs increased beyond their capacity to sustain operations. The bicycle infrastructure that had made Portland famous among urban planning enthusiasts faced new challenges as increased traffic congestion and aggressive driving behaviours made cycling feel less safe for many residents. While the city continued expanding protected bike lanes and bicycle-friendly policies, the culture of mutual respect between cyclists and drivers that had characterised earlier periods seemed to erode as growth brought new residents who were less familiar with Portland's transportation norms. From a muddy riverbank settlement born of a coin toss, Portland has evolved through timber booms, wartime transformations, and countercultural revolutions to become something unprecedented in the American urban landscape. The city's journey reveals both the possibilities and contradictions of progressive ideals meeting market realities. As Portland continues wrestling with questions of growth, equity, and identity, its story offers valuable lessons for communities seeking to balance preservation of character with adaptation to change. Whatever comes next for this Pacific Northwest metropolis, it's certain to be as unexpected and innovative as the remarkable history we've just explored.